The silence of space broke with a flash of blue light. Something massive dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sector 7. Admiral Kethvar's three eyes widened as he stared at the readings on his command screen. His gray skin turned pale blue with shock. "What is that thing?" he hissed through his breathing slits. The object on the screen looked wrong. It was huge, maybe 2 kilometers long, but it moved with strange grace. The ship's design made no sense to Zephyrian eyes. Where Imperial vessels were smooth and curved like flowing water, this newcomer was all sharp angles and flat surfaces. Thick metal plates covered its hull like armor on an ancient warrior. "Sir, it's definitely a ship," reported his sensor officer, tentacles dancing over the control panel. "But the design is completely unknown. It doesn't match any species in our database." Admiral Kethvar commanded the 7th Fleet, 17 massive warships that kept the outer rim of Zephyrian space safe from pirates and rebels. In his 40 years of service, he had seen ships from every known species in the galaxy, but this was something new. On the bridge of the USS Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the alien fleet through the main view screen. His brown hair was streaked with gray, and his blue eyes held the calm confidence of a man who had seen many battles. "Well, Amy, looks like we found them," he said to his communications officer. Amy Rodriguez turned in her chair, her dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail. 17 ships, Captain. They're big ones, too. Energy readings suggest they're more advanced than anything we have back home." Captain Morrison nodded. Humanity had spent 3 years crossing the dark space between galaxies, following strange signals that suggested intelligent life. The USS Liberty was Earth's first and only interstellar warship, built with the best technology humanity could create. But Morrison knew they were probably primitive compared to a civilization that had mastered galactic travel. "Any response to our greeting?" Morrison asked. "Nothing yet, sir. I've been broadcasting on all frequencies for 10 minutes. Universal mathematics, prime numbers, even some basic pictures. If they're intelligent, they should understand we're trying to talk." Chief Engineer Sam Collins looked up from his station. His thick glasses reflected the glow of his instruments. "Captain, their ships are scanning us pretty thoroughly. Whatever they're using is way beyond our sensor technology." Morrison wasn't surprised. The Liberty represented humanity's best effort. But they were newcomers to this galaxy. Still, the ship had crossed impossible distances to get here. Human engineering might be primitive, but it was reliable. "Lieutenant Price, what's our tactical situation?" Morrison asked his weapons officer. Danny Price was young for his rank, barely 25, but he had the best reflexes Morrison had ever seen. "Their ships are in a loose formation, sir. Looks like a patrol pattern. No hostile moves yet, but they've got us surrounded." Morrison studied the alien ships through the view screen. They were beautiful in their own way, all curves and flowing lines like they had been grown rather than built. Blue energy glowed along their hulls, probably some kind of shield system. Each ship was easily 3 times the size of the Liberty. "Captain," Amy called out, "I'm getting something. It's a transmission, but the format is completely alien. Give me a few minutes to run it through the translation matrix." On the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Kethvar was having his own communication problems. His xenobiologist, Dr. Veltar, had been studying the alien ship for 20 minutes and was clearly frustrated. "Admiral, I've never seen anything like this," the scientist reported, his forearms gesturing at his data screens. "The ship appears to be built using primitive metal alloys, but somehow it survived faster than light travel. That should be impossible with their technology level. Could it be a trick?" Kethvar asked. "Maybe they're more advanced than they appear." "I don't think so, sir. Look at their weapon systems. Those appear to be kinetic projectile launchers. Chemical explosives. They're using technology we abandoned thousands of years ago." Admiral Kethvar felt a mix of disappointment and opportunity. He had hoped to encounter a new species that could challenge the Empire's power, maybe even become useful allies. Instead, he had found primitives who had somehow stumbled into his sector. But primitives meant slaves, and slaves meant profit. "Send a standard dominance message," he ordered his communications officer. "Tell them to prepare for boarding and integration into the Empire." Back on the Liberty, Amy Rodriguez finally cracked the alien transmission. Her face went pale as she read the translation. "Captain, you're not going to like this. They're demanding our surrender. The message says we're now property of something called the Zephyrian Empire. We're supposed to shut down our engines and prepare to be boarded." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Morrison had hoped for peaceful first contact, a chance to establish diplomatic relations with an advanced galactic civilization. Instead, humanity's first meeting with alien intelligence was a demand for surrender. "Sir," Danny Price said quietly, "their ships are moving into attack formation. I'm reading energy buildups in what look like weapon systems." Morrison looked around his bridge crew. These men and women had volunteered for a one-way trip across the galaxy. They had families back on Earth they might never see again. They had come in peace, hoping to find friends among the stars, but Morrison was also a military man. He had fought in 3 wars before taking command of the Liberty. He knew the look of predators when he saw it. "Amy, open a channel. All frequencies. Channel open, sir." Morrison stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying the authority of command. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Liberty. We come in peace, seeking diplomatic contact with your civilization. We are not here to threaten anyone, but we will not be enslaved. I repeat, we come in peace, but we will defend ourselves if attacked." Admiral Kethvar listened to the translation with amusement. The primitive was actually trying to negotiate. "How quaint. Charge weapons," he ordered. "Target their engines. We want the ship intact for study." On the Liberty's bridge, warning alarms began to sound. "Captain," Danny Price called out, "they're locking weapons on us. Multiple targets." Morrison felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Humanity's first contact with alien life was about to become humanity's first interstellar battle. He thought briefly of Earth, of the billions of people who were counting on this mission to secure humanity's future among the stars. "All hands. This is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We came here in peace, but it seems our new neighbors have other ideas. Battle stations. Show them what humans are made of." The die was cast. In the dark void between stars, 2 very different philosophies were about to collide. The shuttle bay doors of the USS Liberty opened slowly. Commander Lisa Brooks sat in the pilot's seat of the small diplomatic craft, her hands steady on the controls despite the tension in her stomach. She had volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be the most important conversation in human history. "Remember, Lisa," Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system, "we're here to make friends, but don't let them push us around." "Understood, Captain," Lisa replied. Behind her sat Dr. Greg Thompson, the ship's cultural specialist, and 2 security guards. It wasn't much of a diplomatic team, but it was all they had. The shuttle moved slowly toward the largest Zephyrian ship, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the Liberty. Lisa had never seen anything so large in space. The alien ship was over 5 kilometers long, with smooth curves that made it look almost alive. Blue lights pulsed along its hull like a heartbeat. "Incoming transmission," Dr. Thompson reported, his instruments translating the alien language in real time. "They're giving us landing instructions. Bay 7, Deck 12. Lisa guided the shuttle into the alien ship's belly. The docking bay was enormous, big enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the Liberty. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with energy fields. As soon as they landed, Lisa knew something was wrong. Dozens of armed Zephyrians surrounded the shuttle. They were tall, gray-skinned beings with 3 eyes and tentacle-like appendages where humans had hair. Their weapons were sleek energy rifles that hummed with power. "That's not exactly a welcoming committee," muttered Sergeant Tony Martinez, one of the security guards. The shuttle door opened with a hiss. Lisa stepped out first, her hands raised in the universal gesture of peace. The alien soldiers immediately pointed their weapons at her team. "I am Commander Lisa Brooks of Earth," she said clearly, hoping their translation systems were working. "We come in peace to establish diplomatic relations." A tall Zephyrian stepped forward. His uniform was more elaborate than the others, marking him as a leader. When he spoke, his voice was cold and mechanical through the translation system. "I am Sub-Admiral Velkoth. You will surrender your weapons and submit to processing. Your species will be evaluated for useful skills and assigned appropriate work roles within the Empire." Lisa felt her blood run cold. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not here to surrender. We're here to talk as equals." Velkoth's 3 eyes blinked in what might have been amusement. "Equals? You travel in a primitive metal box powered by crude chemical reactions. Your weapons are projectile launchers that would barely scratch our hull armor. There is no equality here. Only a new slave species that has wandered into our territory." Dr. Thompson stepped forward, his academic mind trying to find common ground. Perhaps we could discuss our respective cultures. We have much to learn from each other. You will learn your place, Velkoth replied. Nothing more. Guards escort them to processing. The Zephyrian soldiers moved forward. Lisa's training kicked in. She had served in the Marine Corps before joining the diplomatic service, and she recognized a bad situation when she saw one. Tony, she said quietly. Sergeant Martinez was already moving. His hand went to his sidearm, a simple projectile weapon that the aliens probably considered a joke. But Martinez had been in combat zones across Earth, and he knew how to handle himself. The first alien soldier went down with 2 bullets in his chest. His energy armor flared and absorbed most of the impact, but the kinetic force knocked him backward. The other Zephyrians raised their weapons, but they hesitated for a crucial second, unused to resistance from primitive species. Run, Lisa shouted. The human team sprinted back toward their shuttle as energy bolts sizzled through the air around them. Dr. Thompson stumbled, but Tony grabbed him and kept moving. Lisa reached the shuttle first and started the engines. Liberty, this is Brooks, she called into her communicator as they lifted off. Diplomatic contact has failed. Repeat, contact has failed. They want to enslave us. On the Liberty's bridge, Captain Morrison listened to the report with a heavy heart. He had hoped for friendship, but he had prepared for war. Get them back safely, Jake, Amy Rodriguez said from her station. The aliens are jamming our communications, but I can track the shuttle's beacon. Captain, Danny Price called out. The alien fleet is moving. They're forming an attack pattern around us. Morrison watched the tactical display as 17 massive ships arranged themselves in a sphere around the Liberty. Each alien vessel outmassed his ship by at least 3 to 1. Energy readings showed they were charging weapons that could probably vaporize the Liberty in seconds. Sir, Chief Engineer Sam Collins reported, they're hitting us with some kind of tractor beam. It's trying to lock onto our hull. Morrison had read about tractor beams in science fiction stories back on Earth. He never thought he would face one in real life. But human engineers were creative, and they had built the Liberty with several surprises. Sam, remember that gravitational disruptor you've been tinkering with? Collins grinned behind his thick glasses. You want me to try it? Do it. The Liberty's experimental gravitational disruptor was based on theoretical physics that most Earth scientists said was impossible. But Sam Collins had never been one to listen to people who said things couldn't be done. He had built the device in his spare time using spare parts and a lot of creativity. The device activated with a deep thrumming sound that made the ship's hull vibrate. Space around the Liberty seemed to twist and bend. The Zephyrian tractor beam struck the gravitational field and rebounded like light hitting a mirror. The feedback traveled back along the beam's path and struck 2 Zephyrian corvettes. The alien ships, designed for energy warfare, had no defense against gravitational forces. Their hulls crumpled like paper, and they exploded in brilliant flashes of light. On the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Kethvar stared at his screens in shock. 2 of his ships had just been destroyed by a primitive vessel using unknown technology. In 40 years of service, he had never seen anything like it. How is that possible? He demanded. Dr. Veltar frantically checked his instruments. I don't know, Admiral. The energy readings don't make sense. They're manipulating gravity itself. Admiral Kethvar felt the first stirring of uncertainty. These humans were supposed to be primitives, but they had just done something that Zephyrian science said was impossible. Commander Brooks's shuttle streaked back toward the Liberty as energy bolts from the alien ship tried to bring it down. Lisa flew like her life depended on it, because it did. The shuttle's small engines were no match for the giant Zephyrian ship, but she used every trick she had learned in flight school. Almost there, she called to her passengers. Hold on. The shuttle slammed into the Liberty's docking bay just as the bay doors closed. Lisa didn't bother with a soft landing. They skidded across the deck and crashed into the far wall, but they were alive and safe. Bridge, this is Brooks, she reported. We're aboard, but those aliens aren't interested in talking. They see us as potential slaves. Morrison's voice was grim when he replied. Understood, Lisa. Get to the bridge. It looks like we're going to have to teach them some manners. On the tactical display, the Zephyrian fleet was moving closer. Weapon systems that could destroy planets were charging up, all aimed at one human ship that had dared to resist the Empire's will. But Jake Morrison had not brought his crew across the galaxy to become slaves. The Liberty might be outnumbered and outgunned, but it carried something the Zephyrian Empire had never faced: human determination and the refusal to give up without a fight. All hands, battle stations, Morrison announced. Today we find out what Earth's children are really made of. The first plasma bolts from the Zephyrian fleet lit up space like artificial stars. Admiral Kethvar watched with satisfaction as his ships opened fire on the primitive human vessel. The concentrated energy barrage should have vaporized the strange alien ship in seconds. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ship's hull seemed to ripple and flow like liquid metal. The plasma bolts struck the surface and scattered in all directions. Their energy dissipated harmlessly into space. Some shots missed entirely as the ship's surface bent the energy beams away. "What kind of armor is that?" Kethvar demanded. On the Liberty's bridge, Lieutenant Commander Kate Foster monitored the defensive systems with intense concentration. Her fingers danced across her control panel as she adjusted the reactive armor plating in real time. "Armor holding steady, Captain," she reported. "The reactive gel is absorbing their energy weapons like a sponge. Temperature's rising, but we're still in the green." Captain Morrison nodded. Human armor technology had taken a different path than most science fiction had predicted. Instead of energy shields, Earth's engineers had developed reactive armor that could actually flow and adapt to incoming attacks. It was heavy, expensive, and required constant maintenance, but it worked. "Danny, show them what kinetic weapons can do," Morrison ordered. Lieutenant Danny Price had been waiting for this moment. His targeting computer locked onto the nearest Zephyrian destroyer, a sleek vessel that probably cost more than Earth's entire defense budget. But Price wasn't impressed by pretty ships. He was impressed by results. "Railgun 1, firing," he announced. The Liberty's main railgun system accelerated a tungsten slug to nearly 10% of light speed. The projectile was simple, just a solid metal rod, but it carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. When it struck the Zephyrian destroyer's energy shields, the results were spectacular. The alien ship's shields were designed to stop energy weapons and deflect plasma bolts. They had never been tested against solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten slug punched through the energy barrier like it wasn't there and kept going. The destroyer's hull crumpled around the impact point. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as critical systems failed. Within seconds, the massive alien warship was nothing but expanding debris. Admiral Kethvar felt his confidence waver. Another of his ships was gone, destroyed by a weapon that shouldn't have been able to penetrate modern defenses. The humans were using kinetic projectiles, the most primitive weapons imaginable, but somehow making them devastatingly effective. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel," he ordered. "Maximum power." The remaining Zephyrian ships poured energy into the Liberty. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and fusion torpedoes lit up space in a brilliant display of destructive power. The human ship disappeared in a ball of superheated energy. When the light faded, the Liberty was still there. "Impossible," Dr. Veltar whispered from his station. Chief Engineer Sam Collins wiped sweat from his forehead as he monitored the ship's systems. The reactive armor was working overtime, channeling incoming energy into the ship's massive heat sinks, but they couldn't take this punishment forever. "Captain, armor's at 60%, he reported. "We can take maybe 2 more volleys like that before things get uncomfortable." Morrison studied the tactical display. 16 alien ships surrounded his vessel, each one bigger and more heavily armed than the Liberty. In a straight fight, they would eventually overwhelm his defenses. But Morrison hadn't become a captain by fighting fair. "Amy, are you still picking up their communications?" he asked. Communications Officer Amy Rodriguez nodded. "Yes, sir. Their encryption is sophisticated, but our computers are learning their patterns. I can understand maybe half of what they're saying." "What are they saying?" "They're confused, sir. They can't understand how we're surviving their attacks. Their admiral is getting angry." Morrison smiled grimly. Angry enemies made mistakes, and the Zephyrians were about to see humanity's real surprise. "Kate, deploy the point defense grid," he ordered. Lieutenant Commander Foster's fingers flew over her controls. All along the Liberty's hull, hidden panels slid open to reveal hundreds of small weapon systems. Each point defense turret was designed to track and destroy incoming missiles. But they could do much more than that. "Danny, load the special ammunition," Morrison said. Price grinned as he selected a different type of projectile for the railgun system. Instead of solid tungsten slugs, these rounds were filled with thousands of tiny ball bearings, each one guided by its own miniature computer brain. Adaptive cluster rounds loaded, sir, Price reported. AI guidance systems are online. The Liberty fired its second railgun shot at a Zephyrian heavy cruiser. The round looked like any other projectile until it was halfway to its target. Then it split apart, releasing a cloud of intelligent submunitions that spread out like a deadly swarm. The Zephyrian ship's point defense systems tried to stop the incoming projectiles. But the AI-guided balls changed course randomly, learning from each defensive shot and adapting their approach. Within seconds, hundreds of small impacts peppered the alien ship's hull. None of them were individually powerful, but together they were like getting hit by a shotgun blast from a giant. The cruiser's armor held, but its sensor arrays and weapon systems were shredded. Blind and helpless, it drifted out of formation. Direct hit, Price reported with satisfaction. Target disabled. Admiral Kethvar was beginning to understand that he had made a serious mistake. These humans were not the primitives they appeared to be. Their technology was different, based on physical principles rather than energy manipulation, but it was devastatingly effective. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship. Put it through, Kethvar ordered. Captain Morrison's face appeared on the main screen, his blue eyes cold as winter steel. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of a man who had seen war and was not impressed by threats. Admiral, I gave you a chance to talk. You chose violence instead. I'm going to give you one more opportunity to reconsider. Call off your attack and we can discuss this like civilized beings. Continue fighting and I'll show you what human military doctrine really looks like. Kethvar's pride overruled his growing caution. No primitive species had ever threatened the Empire and lived to talk about it. He would not be the first admiral to retreat from inferior opponents. Destroy them, he ordered. Morrison watched the alien fleet movements on his tactical display and nodded to himself. He had hoped they would be reasonable, but he had prepared for stubborn. All right, people, he announced to his crew. They want to do this the hard way. Amy, broadcast the liberation signal on all frequencies. Let's see who wants to be free. Unknown to the Zephyrians, the Liberty had been listening to their communications and learning about their empire. The ship's computers had identified dozens of slave species forced to serve aboard Imperial vessels. Amy Rodriguez began broadcasting a simple message in every language they had detected. Freedom is possible. Fight for it. The effect was immediate. On 3 Zephyrian ships, slave crews in the engine rooms began sabotaging their own vessels. Emergency alarms wailed as power systems failed and weapons went offline. Navigator Ryan Clark plotted a new course through the confused alien formation. Captain, I've got us a path through their lines. If we move now, we can hit their flagship before they reorganize. Do it, Morrison ordered. All hands, brace for combat maneuvering. The Liberty surged forward, its engines pushing the massive ship to speeds that made the Zephyrian vessels look slow and clumsy. Human engineering philosophy had always favored reliability and performance over elegance. The ship wasn't pretty, but it could accelerate like a fighter craft when needed. Point defense turrets along the Liberty's hull opened fire as the ship charged through the alien formation. Hundreds of small projectiles reached out to touch Zephyrian ships, each one guided by sophisticated computer brains that learned and adapted with every shot. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. Where they expected energy shields, they found adaptive armor. Where they expected plasma weapons, they faced kinetic projectiles that their defenses couldn't stop. Where they expected submission, they found defiance backed by superior engineering. As the Liberty broke through the enemy formation and aimed for the flagship, Captain Morrison allowed himself a small smile. The Zephyrians were about to learn that humanity didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being polite to bullies. The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Council convened in the crystal halls of the Imperial Palace. High Admiral Zekmoth stood before the assembled leaders, his gray skin pale with the shame of bringing terrible news. The holographic display behind him showed the wreckage of what had once been the 7th Fleet. 17 ships, he announced, his voice hollow, gone. Destroyed by a single alien vessel using primitive kinetic weapons. The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Council leader Thexvar raised one of her 4 arms for silence, her ancient eyes fixed on the display. How is this possible? She demanded. Our fleet possessed the finest weapons and shields in the galaxy. The aliens call themselves humans, Zekmoth explained. They don't use energy weapons or shields. Instead, they fire solid projectiles at incredible speeds and protect themselves with some kind of adaptive armor. Our defenses were useless against their attack methods. Council member Jekrin leaned forward, his tentacles writhing with agitation. A single ship cannot threaten the Empire. Send a larger fleet. It's not just their weapons, Zekmoth continued. They're broadcasting messages to our slave populations. Inciting rebellion. 3 ships in Admiral Kethvar's fleet were sabotaged from within, before the humans even reached them. The implication sent a chill through the council chamber. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 47 star systems and enslaved dozens of species through superior technology, and the absolute belief that resistance was futile. If word spread that someone had successfully fought back, it could trigger uprisings across the galaxy. Where is this human ship now? Thexvar asked. Moving deeper into our territory, Zekmoth admitted. Long-range sensors show they're heading toward the Altair system. The Altair system was home to 17 billion Zephyrian civilians and served as a major industrial center. More importantly, it housed the largest slave population in the Empire. Workers from a dozen different species forced to operate the massive mining operations. Mobilize the Grand Fleet, Thexvar ordered. Every available ship. I want 5,000 vessels converging on the Altair system within 48 hours. High Admiral Zekmoth nodded grimly. The Grand Fleet was the Empire's ultimate weapon, representing the combined military might of a galactic civilization. No force in known space could stand against it. But as he left the council chamber to issue orders, Zekmoth couldn't shake the feeling that they were dealing with something unprecedented. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Liberty, Captain Morrison stood in his ready room studying intelligence reports that painted a grim picture of the galaxy they had stumbled into. Dr. Helen Carter, the ship's chief medical officer, sat across from his desk with a cup of coffee, her face troubled. Jake, what we're seeing is horrific, she said, reviewing the translated Zephyrian databases they had captured. Systematic enslavement of entire species. Billions of sentient beings forced into labor camps. Children taken from their families and conditioned for specific work roles. Morrison nodded, his jaw tight with anger. The Liberty had come seeking peaceful contact with galactic civilization. Instead, they had found something that challenged every principle humanity held sacred. The question is, what do we do about it? Morrison said. We're one ship against an empire that spans half the galaxy. Security Chief Tony Martinez knocked on the door and entered, followed by Dr. Greg Thompson. Both men looked as troubled as the captain felt. Sir, we've been analyzing the communications we intercepted during the battle, Thompson reported. The Zephyrians maintain control through fear, and the belief that their technology makes them invincible. Our victory has shaken that belief badly. How badly? Morrison asked. Martinez pulled up a holographic display showing intercepted transmissions. We're picking up increased chatter from slave populations throughout their territory. Word is spreading that someone fought the Empire and won. There are reports of work slowdowns, minor sabotage, even some direct resistance. Morrison studied the data, his tactical mind working through the implications. The Zephyrian Empire was like a house of cards built on the foundation of absolute technological superiority. Remove that foundation and the whole structure might collapse. What about their military response? He asked. Massive, Thompson replied. They're mobilizing everything they have. Best estimates suggest at least 5,000 ships heading our way. Dr. Carter set down her coffee cup with a clink. Jake, we can't fight 5,000 ships. Our armor and weapons gave us an advantage against 17 vessels, but there are limits to what we can do. Morrison walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of enslaved beings were looking for hope. The Liberty could run, could head back toward Earth and leave this galaxy to its fate. But Jake Morrison had not spent his life in military service to abandon people who needed help. Amy, he called over the intercom. How's our communication with the local populations? Getting better every hour, Captain, Rodriguez replied from the bridge. We've established contact with resistance groups on 7 different worlds. They're organizing, but they need leadership and support. Morrison made his decision. Set course for the Kepler Nebula. If we're going to make a stand, we'll do it there. The Kepler Nebula was a vast cloud of gas and cosmic dust that would interfere with sensors and long-range weapons. It would level the playing field between one human ship and a massive alien fleet. As the Liberty changed course, Morrison called his senior staff to the briefing room. When they were assembled, he looked around the table at the faces of people who had followed him across the galaxy. "I won't lie to you," he began. "The Empire is sending everything they have to destroy us. 5,000 ships, maybe more. We're outnumbered by odds that would make any sane person surrender." Chief Engineer Sam Collins adjusted his glasses and grinned. "Good thing we're not sane, Captain." Morrison smiled at the engineer's comment. "We have advantages they don't understand. Our technology is different from theirs. Our tactics are flexible where theirs are rigid. Most importantly, we're fighting for something they can't comprehend, the idea that freedom is worth dying for." Lieutenant Commander Kate Foster looked up from her tactical display. "What's the plan, sir?" "We're going to do what humans do best," Morrison replied. "We're going to adapt, improvise, and refuse to give up. Amy, I want you to coordinate with every resistance group in this sector. Tell them that when we engage the Grand Fleet, it's their signal to begin general uprising." "Aye, sir," Rodriguez replied. "Sam, how long do you need to modify our weapon systems with the captured Zephyrian technology?" Collins thought for a moment. "Give me 12 hours and I can create some real surprises. Their energy manipulation tech combined with our kinetic weapons should produce interesting results." "Do it," Morrison ordered. "Kate, work with Danny on new defensive patterns. The nebula will help, but we need to maximize every advantage." Navigator Ryan Clark studied the star charts. "Captain, there's something else. Long-range scans show several alien fleets in the area, not Zephyrian ships. They're keeping their distance, but they're watching." Morrison nodded. Word of humanity's victory was spreading beyond just the slave populations. Other species, other civilizations were taking notice. Some might be potential allies, others might be waiting to see who won before choosing sides. Dr. Thompson looked up from his analysis of Zephyrian society. "Captain, I think we have a real chance here. Their empire is built on the myth of invincibility. Every victory we achieve weakens that myth and strengthens the resistance movements. But we have to survive long enough to matter," Dr. Carter pointed out practically. Morrison stood up, his decision made. "Then we better make sure we give them a fight they'll never forget. We came here representing the best of humanity. Let's show this galaxy what that really means." As the meeting broke up and the crew prepared for the battle of their lives, none of them knew that their actions were already changing the balance of power in the galaxy. Across Zephyrian space, enslaved populations were organizing. Resistance groups were emerging from hiding, and for the first time in centuries, the Empire was facing the possibility of losing control. The USS Liberty was more than just a ship now. It had become a symbol, a beacon of hope for every being who had ever dreamed of freedom, and Captain Jake Morrison was determined to make sure that beacon kept shining, no matter the cost. The Kepler Nebula stretched across space like a vast rainbow of gas and stardust. Purple and blue clouds swirled around ancient stars, creating a maze of color and shadow that confused sensors and blocked long-range communications. It was beautiful, deadly, and the perfect place for humanity's last stand. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the tactical display as 5,000 Zephyrian ships approached through the nebula. The Grand Fleet was an impressive sight, massive vessels arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with energy shields and weapon systems. "They're maintaining tight formation," observed Chief Tactical Officer Brad Johnson, who had taken over primary weapons control for the final battle. "Classic Imperial doctrine. Overlapping fields of fire, coordinated defense screens." Morrison nodded. The Zephyrians were fighting by the book, using tactics that had worked for them for thousands of years. But books could be rewritten. "Sam, are the modifications ready?" Morrison asked. Chief Engineer Collins looked up from his station, grease stains on his uniform and a satisfied smile on his face. "Better than ready, Captain. I've combined their energy manipulation technology with our kinetic systems. When we fire now, the projectiles will be wrapped in energy fields that adapt to whatever they hit. And the other surprise? Installed and tested, the Zephyrians are about to learn that humans are very good at making things explode." High Admiral Zekmoth commanded the Grand Fleet from his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion. Around him, his staff monitored the approaching battle with grim determination. The human ship was small and alone, drifting in the nebula like a lost child. "Sir, we have them on sensors," reported his tactical officer. "They're not moving to escape, just sitting there." Zekmoth studied the display with suspicion, After the destruction of the Seventh Fleet, he had learned not to underestimate these humans. But what could one ship do against 5,000? "Deploy the fleet in attack formation, Alpha," he ordered. "All ships maintain maximum firepower and coordinate targeting. I want that vessel destroyed in the first volley." On the Liberty, Amy Rodriguez was coordinating with resistance groups across the galaxy. Her communications board showed dozens of encrypted signals from enslaved populations preparing for revolt. "Captain, the Altarians are ready," she reported. "They've sabotaged the main shipyard at Vega 7. The Corithians have seized control of 3 mining stations. Resistance groups on 47 worlds are standing by for our signal." Morrison felt the weight of history on his shoulders. This battle wasn't just about one human ship anymore. It had become the spark that could ignite a galactic revolution. "Danny, what's our status on those special torpedoes?" Morrison asked. Lieutenant Price checked his weapons display. "All tubes loaded with the hybrid munitions, sir. Sam's energy-wrapped kinetic penetrators are ready to go." The Liberty's weapons had been completely redesigned using captured Zephyrian technology. Instead of simple railgun slugs, they now fired projectiles surrounded by adaptive energy fields that could change properties based on what they encountered. It was human engineering combined with alien science, and the results were devastating. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported Navigator Ryan Clark. Morrison opened a channel to the Grand Fleet. High Admiral Zekmoth's image appeared on the main screen, his 3 eyes cold with the certainty of victory. "Human Captain," Zekmoth said, "you have caused enough trouble for the Empire. Surrender now and your death will be quick." Morrison smiled, his blue eyes reflecting the calm confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Admiral, I'm going to give you the same chance I gave your predecessor. Withdraw your fleet, release all enslaved populations, and we can discuss peaceful coexistence. Continue this attack and I'll show you why humanity survived long enough to reach the stars." Zekomoth's laugh was harsh through the translator. "You face 5,000 ships with one primitive vessel. What can you possibly do?" "Watch and learn," Morrison replied, cutting the channel. "The Grand Fleet opened fire with the combined power of a small star." 5,000 ships poured energy into the nebula, enough destructive force to sterilize an entire planet. The space around the Liberty became a furnace of plasma and particle beams. When the light faded, the human ship was gone. Zekmoth allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Finally, the annoying primitives had been dealt with. But his triumph was short-lived, sir, his sensor operator called out. "The human ship, it's behind us." The Liberty had used the nebula's interference to mask its movement, diving deep into the gas clouds and emerging behind the Grand Fleet's formation. Morrison had studied every battle in human history, from ancient naval engagements to modern space conflicts. The key to victory against overwhelming odds was always the same: don't fight fair. "All tubes, fire," Morrison ordered. 24 hybrid torpedoes launched from the Liberty's weapon bays. Each projectile was guided by an artificial intelligence programmed with the tactical knowledge of Earth's greatest military minds. As they flew toward their targets, the energy fields around them began adapting to Zephyrian defensive systems. The first torpedo struck a heavy cruiser and punched completely through its hull. The energy field had analyzed the ship's armor and configured itself for maximum penetration. Secondary explosions rippled along the vessel's length as critical systems failed. The second torpedo hit a destroyer and split into multiple warheads, each one seeking a different target. The Zephyrian point defense systems couldn't track the rapidly multiplying threats. Within minutes, a dozen Imperial ships were burning wrecks drifting through the nebula, but the Liberty's real surprise was yet to come. "Sam, activate the resonance cascade," Morrison ordered. Collins grinned as he engaged his most creative modification. Using Zephyrian energy manipulation technology, he had found a way to create a feedback loop in their power systems. The cascade effect spread from ship to ship through their energy networks, causing shields to collapse and weapons to overload. One by one, Imperial vessels began shutting down as their own technology turned against them. The rigid formation that was supposed to be their strength became their weakness as the cascade spread through their interconnected systems. "Impossible," Zekmoth whispered as he watched his fleet falling apart. That was when the resistance struck. Across the galaxy, Enslaved populations rose up in coordinated rebellion. Mining stations fell silent as workers seized control. Shipyards exploded as saboteurs destroyed years of construction. Transportation networks ground to a halt as freight haulers switched sides. Most importantly, the slave crews aboard imperial vessels turned on their masters. On over 1,000 ships in the Grand Fleet, engineering teams shut down power systems while security forces overwhelmed their Zephyrian. Overseers Amy Rodriguez's communications board lit up like a Christmas tree as reports flooded in from across Zephyrian space. Captain, we're getting confirmations from everywhere. The uprising is working. Dozens of worlds have declared independence. Morrison watched the tactical display as the Grand Fleet disintegrated. Ships were surrendering, fleeing, or simply drifting powerless through space. The mighty Imperial Armada had become a collection of scattered survivors. High Admiral Zekmoth found himself aboard one of the few vessels still under Zephyrian control. His crew was looking at him with expressions ranging from fear to barely concealed mutiny. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from over 3,000 ships. The fleet is falling apart." Zekmoth stared at the display showing the human vessel moving through his broken formation like an avenging angel. How had it all gone so wrong? How had one primitive ship destroyed the greatest military force in galactic history? Morrison opened a channel to the remaining Imperial ships. His image appeared on thousands of screens throughout the nebula. "Attention Zephyrian fleet," he announced. "Your empire is finished. Your enslaved populations are free. Any ship that wishes to surrender will be treated with honor and respect. Any ship that continues to fight will be destroyed." One by one, the remaining Imperial vessels powered down their weapons and transmitted surrender codes. The Grand Fleet, pride of the Zephyrian Empire, had become prisoners of a single human ship and its crew of 200. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy transformed completely. The Galactic Liberation Alliance was formed with the USS Liberty as its flagship. Dozens of formerly enslaved species joined the alliance, contributing their knowledge, resources, and determination to build a better future. Captain Morrison found himself promoted to Admiral Morrison, commander of a growing fleet of liberated ships. But he never forgot that the real victory belonged to the billions of beings who had chosen freedom over slavery, hope over despair. Dr. Helen Carter established medical centers to help former slaves recover from their trauma. Chief Engineer Sam Collins worked with alien scientists to develop new technologies that combined the best of human and galactic knowledge. Amy Rodriguez became the Alliance's chief diplomat, coordinating with dozens of species as they learned to work together as equals. The Zephyrian Empire still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self, reduced to a handful of core worlds and forced to treat its remaining population as citizens rather than subjects. Some Zephyrians even joined